Greetings, citizens. Just days after President Donald Trump shocked the entire world by his meeting with Lionel, the main advocate of a mysterious believed to be secret military group named Kunman, whose revelations of over 40,000 sealed indictments have left in terror the entire U.S. shadow government deep state. A beyond stunning new Ministry of Foreign Affairs, MOFA, report circulating in the Kremlin today outlining the points to be discussed between Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo during their upcoming meeting at the United Nations notes that its main focus will be centered on a sealed indictment issued for the arrest of former United States Vice President Joseph Biden for his criminal involvement in what is known as the Burisma Holdings scandal, and whose pending arrest now sees the White House in turmoil over their not fully knowing what its reverberations might be. According to this report, one of the most serious concerns of Foreign Minister Lavrov over this past year has been the joke indictment issued by Special Counsel Robert Mueller against Russian companies and individuals comically alleging that they interfered in the 2016 U.S. presidential election, that stands opposed to the true meddlers of this election exposed by FBI Special Agent Jonathan Moffat, who just told the U.S. Congress that the FBI has used leaked stories to obtain FISA warrants. Pentagon whistleblower Adam Lovinger, likewise, exposing that the Trump campaign was illegally spied on by CIA operatives planted into it by Obama's corrupt FBI and the U.S. Intelligence Community Inspector General, ICIG, revealing that virtually all of Hillary Clinton's emails were stolen by Chinese intelligence, all of which, just hours ago, caused Lavrov to erupt and declare, "Can anyone truly believe that a restaurant owner from Russia could influence an election in such a powerful country as the United States by publishing some posts on social media? The idea itself makes the entire U.S. political system look ridiculous by presenting democracy there as a house of cards." Most particularly angering Foreign Minister Lavrov about the United States, this report continues, was his being told this past week by Secretary of the Security Council Nikolai Patrushev that all of the events now occurring in Washington are nothing as they appear, with Patrushev noting, after his meeting with U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton last week in Geneva, that forces loyal to President Trump were playing a long game against their deep state enemies by their leveraging the U.S. federal legal system, and explains why former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort didn't even bother to defend himself against Special Counsel Mueller, as the jokingly indicted Russian company Concord Management has embarked on legal course to throw Special Counsel Mueller out of office, that would immediately overturn everything he's done, while at the same time, Trump's legal forces are nearing another legal ruling that would forbid Mueller from ever being able to make his findings public. And upon Lavrov understanding that a Russian company and its owner were being used as pawns in this game, slammed it as being nothing but a mockery of American democracy. Note, unlike anyone else Special Counsel Robert Mueller has indicted, the Russian company Concord Management case is the only one able to expedite its appeal challenging the constitutionality of Mueller's appointment to the U.S. Court of Appeals, that it's now doing, and the U.S. Supreme Court. In our reading this MOFA report about Foreign Minister Lavrov's growing anger of the Americans' treatment of Russian company Concord Management, we were prepared to write you a report about it, until we noticed it containing a small footnote referencing an addition made to the minutes of the August 22, 2018 Security Council (SC) meeting, wherein it was documented that a top former Deutsche Bank official named Robert Khuzami, who worked with Trump to secure an over $650 million loan, was approved by President Trump to be a U.S. Deputy Attorney General. Upon U.S. Deputy Attorney General Khuzami assuming office, in January 2018, the Security Council had previously detailed, and as we reported on in our report, U.S. mainstream media plunges mindlessly into masterful Trump trap, not knowing that it spells their own doom, how he was unleashed against former Trump attorney Michael Cohen, and that was due to President Trump discovering that Cohen had embarked upon a scheme to use his White House access for personal gain, But that today's MoFA report stunningly reveals wasn't even close to the most shocking case Kazami is working on, and whose shocking revelations about are contained in a barely noticed May 16, 2018 U.S. Department of Justice press release authorized by U.S. Deputy Attorney General Robert Kazami titled "Former CEO of two investment advisors pleads guilty to defrauding a Native American tribe and various investors," and whose most devastating words that led to the sealed indictment being issued against former United States Vice President Joseph Biden are. From March 2014 through April 2016, Morton, along with her co-conspirators Jason Galanis, John Galanis, A/K/A Yanni, Hugh Dunkerley, Gary Hurst, Devin Archer, and Bevan Cooney, engaged in a fraudulent scheme to misappropriate the proceeds of bonds issued by the Wakpami Lake Community Corporation, WLCC, a Native American tribal entity, the tribal bonds, and to use funds in the accounts of clients of asset management firms controlled by Morton and others to purchase the tribal bonds, which the clients were then unable to redeem or sell because the bonds were illiquid and lacked a ready secondary market. As for the defendants who have not pled guilty, John Galanis, Devin Archer, and Bevan Cooney, the description of the charges set forth herein constitute only allegations. Though not known to the masses of the American people, this report says, U.S. Deputy Attorney Kazami in publicly naming Devin Archer as an unindicted co-conspirator, whom, without a doubt, is fully cooperating with the U.S. Department of Justice, rather than spend the rest of his life in prison, has struck a knife straight into the very heart of the deep state, as Archer, far from being an ordinary criminal, is the longtime business partner of Hunter Biden, the son of former U.S. Vice President Joseph Biden, and Chris Hines, the stepson of former U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, the two highest-ranked officials of Obama-Clinton regime. Beginning in the summer of 2009, shortly after President Obama had taken power, this report details, Devin Archer, Hunter Biden and Chris Hines established a series of related companies, with the trunk of the tree being Rosemont Capital, the alternative investment fund of the Hines family office, and Rosemont Farm being the name of the Hines family's 90-acre estate outside Fox Chapel, Pennsylvania, and that joined forces in doing business in China with another politically connected consultancy called the Thornton Group, a Massachusetts-based firm is headed by James Bulger, the nephew of the notorious mob hitman James Whitey Bulger, and whose fortune soared into the billions of dollars. Vastly aiding the fortunes of Devin Archer, Hunter Biden, and Chris Hines, this report notes, was the Obama regime's overthrowing the legitimately elected government of Ukraine in 2014, and that the global intelligence firm Stratfor, known as the Shadow CIA, declared was the most blatant coup in history, and immediately after which saw Hunter Biden being appointed as a director of the Ukrainian private natural gas producer Burisma Holdings, that is owned by Ukraine billionaire oligarch Nikolai Zlochevsky, who is best known for thwarting all criminal investigations against him, and saw no problem whatsoever in making Hunter Biden a director, even though Biden had been thrown out of the U.S. Navy for drug use, and is the type of person one would expect being hired to manage billions of dollars in the alternative universe these criminals live in. In the weeks just prior to U.S. Deputy Attorney General Kazami naming Devin Archer as an unindicted co-conspirator, this report continues, the noted American investigative journalist Peter Schweitzer released a barely publicized book titled Secret Empires, How the American Political Class Hides Corruption and Enriches Family, that details, using U.S. government records and documents that could only have been obtained from Trump loyalists, how Devin Archer, Hunter Biden and Chris Hines created their Rosemont Capital to be a Clinton Foundation on steroids, with it being fully detailed how foreign visits made by both Vice President Biden and Secretary of State Kerry were rapidly followed by massive infusions of cash into Rosemont Capital, that is known as a pay-to-play scheme. This report concludes with MoFA intelligence analysts noting their grave concerns relating to the information Devon Archer is spilling forth to U.S. Deputy Attorney General Kazami that led to former Vice President Biden having a sealed indictment issued against him, but upon whose arrest would ignite a firestorm against President Trump, whose deep state enemies would claim he is turning America into a dictatorship that unjustly jails its political opponents, but that Trump, apparently, doesn't fear at all as he prepares to finish off of his enemies, no matter what the cost to either himself or his nation. Trump meets Topkin and backer in White House as Australia becomes latest nation to rout Soros forces. Well, if you thought that last month was enough to spin the heads off of even the most experienced of us who have tracked, analyzed and written about global intelligence matters for decades, Sister Sierra's special report yesterday, 11 weeks that shook the world, the end game begins! Shows clearly that what we've all seen so far in the President Trump deep state war is nothing compared to what's about to happen, and it matters not if you love him or hate him. Trump absolutely has to be given credit for having more chutzpah, the quality of audacity, for good or for bad, than all of his enemies combined for his meeting in his White House Oval Office on Thursday with the internationally syndicated radio, television and YouTube legal and media analyst known simply as Lionel, whose full name is Michael William Lionel and who is the major media influencer behind the mysterious person and/or group known as Kin and who have shaken the deep state to its core, with Trump following that extraordinary meeting the next day by his calling to congratulate Australia's new Prime Minister Scott Morrison, whose conservative populist forces became the latest nation to throw off of themselves the yoke of globalist billionaire provocateur George Soros. Now, before I go on, and based upon the stunning information revealed by the sisters this past week describing how the American people are in the grip of cognitive dissonance, and its mainstream media is suffering from the mass psychosis known as confirmation bias, I feel compelled to warn you that if you are not familiar with the truth, what you will read hereafter will not only be unable to be assimilated in your mind, it may very well lead you to suffering a complete mental breakdown. So, and for you fearless few who have doubtlessly led your lives failing to ever heed warnings of any kind, as all rebels like you are known for, I first must describe to you the battlefield where the main battles of the Trump deep state war are being fought, and is known as the dark web. That's a small part of the deep web whose contents are not indexed by standard web search engines for any reason, and stands opposed to the social web you go on every day, Facebook, YouTube, Google, Twitter, etc., and that you should never ever think about entering unless you're prepared to spend thousands of dollars to install a gazillion specialized software applications, encryption keys and Tor browser, and spend, at least, 5 years of your life learning to master the complexity of it all. Because of its anonymity, and everyone on the dark web belonging to either state intelligence agencies, NSA/CIA/SVR/Mossad, etc., hacking groups or international criminal organizations, the vast majority of its communications are highly encrypted, particularly because they are messages sent to and from spies, and that sees a constant battle among its inhabitants trying to decrypt each other's messages and then expose them for others on the dark web to see. Beginning in early February 2017, a month after President Trump took office, though, a new presence began appearing in the dark web that was quickly determined to be emanating its encrypted messages from the United States, and whose thousands of messages spooked hacking groups because its encryption sophistication could only have been created by a nation-state having unlimited resources and hundreds, if not thousands, of highly skilled computer programmers to write its code, that has to be constantly updated on a near-hourly basis, and that, of course, made this new dark web presence a target for everyone. This new dark web presence, however, had a few tricks up its own sleeve and struck back hard against those trying to hack its encryption, with 2017 going down in history as the greatest year for cybersecurity disasters, the absolute worst of them being the Stuxnet, Industroyer, which, literally, smoked every computer it touched, and is described as being like something out of a Tom Clancy novel. By late October 2017, the only ones still playing around with this new dark web presence trying to break its encryption were a few nation-states, as it's very expensive to replace smoked-down computers. But that, on October 27, 2017, saw one of these nation-states hacking teams, everyone knows it was Mossad, gleefully proclaiming that they had made a breakthrough by decrypting a single word, Pacer, but that no one knew the meaning behind. 24 hours later, though, on October 28, 2018, the entire dark web was stunned when this new presence popped up on the social media anonymous message board 4chan, identifying itself as Canaan and declaring that the definition of Pacer is the acronym for a U.S. Department of Justice computer program known as Public Access to Electronic Records, that identifies how many sealed indictments have been issued in the United States, and whose average number per year has never exceeded 1,700. Canaan went on to provide indisputable evidence that Pacer was churning out thousands of sealed indictments every month that now total over 40,000, and that Canaan asserted were being used to secretly indict everyone connected to the deep state, and that even Time magazine couldn't ignore the facts of and saw them naming Canaan as one of the 25 most influential people on the internet. Once Canaan went public on the social web, everyone of good sense on the dark web ceased trying to break its encryption. After all, no one knows how far and why Trump is casting his sealed indictment net, or who it will fall on next, but that saw Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter Glenn Greenwald, of Edward Snowden fame, nevertheless, unleashing his investigative reporters in an attempt to discover the identity of Canaan, but who only got as far as writing their December 4, 2017 article describing how Trump was building a global, private spy network that would circumvent official U.S. intelligence agencies, after which he was warned to stop his investigation, and that he wisely did as he was already under an assassination threat from British intelligence. The warning Greenwald received from the mysterious Canaan network on the dark web to stop his investigation is not the only one they have issued either, as in their never-ceasing thousands of daily encrypted communications, there sometimes appears unencrypted words in English everyone knows, in our world at least, are subjects and/or persons not permitted to be openly discussed or written about, but whose prohibition pertains only to the mainstream media, not us, or those like us, and is why we're one of the only news outlets you see such subjects being made public, such as Russia's top 3 intelligence officials secretly flying to Washington, or the very forbidden persons not to be publicly be named such as Stefan Halper and Joseph Mifsud being mentioned. Now while you're following me down this Alice in Wonderland rabbit hole, let me tell you where it gets very interesting, and that actually began 2 months prior to when Canaan emerged from the dark web and made its presence known on the social web, and whose specific date is August 18, 2017, when former Trump campaign chairman, and former U.S. Navy intelligence officer, Steve Bannon resigned from the White House as a top advisor to President Trump. Immediately after resigning from the White House, Bannon traveled to Brussels where he alarmed European globalists with his creation of a new supergroup he named the Movement to challenge the work of George Soros, whose numerous open society foundations have promoted liberal democracy across Europe for decades. Bannon's first mission in Europe was to ensure the election victory of the Trump populist Chancellor of Austria Sebastian Kurz, whom Trump's German ambassador, Richard Grenell, calls a rock star, but whose most momentous date of this Bannon-Kurz relationship was February 28, 2018, the date Bannon allowed the first major interview of him to be published since his leaving the White House, and when forces loyal to Chancellor Kurz stormed the offices of Austria's main domestic intelligence agency, carting off some of their nation's most sensitive secrets in open crates and plastic bags, and whose top globalist-aligned spy service officials, working from home that day, saw themselves being greeted by officers threatening to break down their doors. Among the many globalist secrets discovered by the forces loyal to Chancellor Kurz in their raids was a George Soros-created master plan to use tech giants Facebook, Google, Twitter, YouTube, and Apple, led by a coalition of George Soros-funded progressive groups, to subvert the 2018 midterm American elections so they can take back power in Washington from President Trump's administration, that Dr. Robert Epstein, the senior research psychologist at the American Institute for Behavioral Research and Technology, is now warning can shift upwards of 12 million votes this November, and whose implementation is well underway, with the latest examples, within the past 24 hours alone, being Facebook censoring the phrase "Speak the Truth, Love God, Defend America," and they're banning anyone daring to post the words of America's national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner, that conforms to these leftists' ideology that now sees them, also, having U.S. schools drop the Pledge of Allegiance and replacing it with student-authored oaths to a global society. Though George Soros actually believes that he's a god, his more earthly actions can be understood by your knowing that President Trump has cost him $1 billion so far, and that after Bannon was armed with the secret globalist evidence given to him by Chancellor Kurz of Soros's master plan to destroy Trump, saw him working with pro-Trump nation Hungary to throw Soros out of there entirely, the pro-Trump nation of Poland throwing Soros out of their country, Italy outplaying Soros in their just-held elections, and now going full Trump, with President Trump offering them aid to pay their debts if they need it, and, within the past 48 hours, Australia now joining these other nations in throwing off the yoke of Soros too. Now I'm telling you about these other nations fighting for President Trump so you can understand that you're not alone, and, also, to show you that this war we are now in is global, that, in turn, should lead you to understanding the full and grim significance the new FEMA plan that includes immediate preparedness being made for the American people, that envisions a scenario involving large nuclear detonations over the 60 largest U.S. cities. The sisters will be reporting more about this to you in the coming days once their documents have been translated. It's not my, or the sisters', fault that the vast majority of you have been deprived of knowing true history, that if you fully knew about would prove conclusively that President Trump's plan B to win his war against the deep state, thus freeing the American people from globalist tyranny, is to wipe them out with total war, and that both Russia and China will willingly aid him in doing, and are right now preparing for, all of whom would rather suffer the catastrophic consequences of war than live another year under the threat of these vile monsters. President Trump's Plan A, of course, is to continue marshaling the American people behind him so his forces can win the 2018 midterm elections, after which he and his Canaan allies will start rounding up his nation's enemies and doing away with the deep state threat, but whose Plan B is being put into place because he knows, and you know this too, that if defeated, the deep state will not only destroy him, but every member of his family too, with their then moving on to obliterating his supporters. You, therefore, are the only ones standing between President Trump using Plan A or Plan B, with your choice of his using Plan B being the easiest, because all you have to do is nothing, ignore reality, and go back to sleep, and if you choose Plan A, it means that you have to wake up and start aiding those of us on the front lines of this war to keep it from reaching your doorstep, and starts by your going below to give us a mere $20 so we can continuing spreading the truth the deep state doesn't want anyone to know about, and, at least to me, seems like a smart investment in your own future. Thank you for listening and aiding us in our hour of desperate need, and, as always too, please feel free to write me at sortrafael@fastmail.fm with any comments/questions/suggestions, and remembering to put attention, Brian, in the subject line. All the best, folks. Brian. Webmaster. Paris. Father.